Hi dear friends. It is with a great joy that I take part in this wonderful meeting. Meeting of old friends, new friends, eternal friends. And only Jesus can gather so many hearts into one heart. And I am happy, so happy to take part in it. Jesus always gives us the best, and that's why he gave us Chico, Xavier and his works, and he also gave us our dear Emmanuel. And also Jesus gives us the opportunity to have you with us. So thank you very much for your presence here. If I can define this meeting, I said it in one word, it's joy. But joy is only complete when there is gratitude. So lots of joy and lots of gratitude to be here at the second world meeting of Jesus Friends with Chico Xavier and his legacy. I am Altino Mageste from GAP, Grupo Amigos de Paulo e Estevão. I was invited to talk about an implied topic in the book 50 Years Later. And the proposed theme was healing on the pathways of Célia. So, let's see some aspects of this wonderful work of the enlightened spirit Emmanuel and one of the greatest mediums in history, Chico Xavier. So in this book, 50 years later, Emmanuel tells us a story that is linked to Christianity in the 2nd century. If you haven't read 2000 years ago, I recommend reading as some characters of the novel 2000 years ago are back in this history here. And that's why it's called 50 years later. However, this book's main character is in fact a woman named Célia, whose sublime heroism was a beacon on the path of several disheartened and suffering spirits, as Emmanuel describes. So, walking with Célia Lucius is also walking alongside with Emmanuel, with Chico, and of course walking with Jesus. And that's why there is healing on Célia's path, because there is Jesus, and in Célia's pathway Jesus is alive. For the past 30 years I've read, studied, traveled, followed and mapped Célia Lucius' pathways. From the moment she leaves her father's house in the luxury neighborhood of Altino in Rome and starts walking aimlessly through the streets of the eternal city, Rome. Later on, actually recently, maybe 7-8 years ago, by request of friends, we created GAP, whose objective is to verify and study, to certify and compare the texts of the early Christianity books wrote by Emmanuel and Chico in the place where everything happened. So, for example, you can imagine the emotion it is to read the text. For example, the conversation between Abigail and Jaziel in the prison in Corinth. That dialogue is in the book Paul and Steve by Chico and Emmanuel. Well, with the help of spiritual benefactors, I managed to locate the old prison of Corinth and with such incredible precision. I found the way Emmanuel wrote it in a book, the way he told it. So Emmanuel wrote like that on the text. And opening the door of the old house, she was in a busy street of the square. So, and the prison is really facing away just a few meters from the central square of Corinth. And I'm just bringing this example here to clarify that my talking is based on literature in archaeological and historical and geographical researches. So I talk to archaeologists in Pompeii. I see the works being done in Ephesus. I use history books, travel guides to dive into this sea of blessings and knowledge. Yes, the literary works of Emmanuel, through the mediumships of Chico and Xavier, are a sea of blessings, an open and wide ocean of knowledge. And before I go ahead with our main talking, I would like to say two things for you. The first, that I'm talking about the meetings that GAP used to do, covering all the places quoted and when and where everything happens in the Emmanuel's and Chico Xavier books. And I would like to say that our meetings are 100% free. All right? It's very important to say we don't charge for anything. We just want people to be there with us with open and mind and arms open there, so to join the moment and to learn together. Whether in Rome or in Jerusalem, in Athens, we sat on the benches, in the squares, on the steps, in the catacombs, where the first Christians gathered and shared there our faith, our knowledge, our learning. So nature is our place of study. Many decades ago, Chico Xavier used to do his Gospels studies under an avocado tree in a very humble area where he used to live. Then I joke that we do not have an avocado tree where the places we go, but we do have the shade of a cypress or eventually an olive tree. The fact is that we are under the shadow of the gospel, no matter where. So that's the first point about our meetings, all right? The second point is that I didn't meet Chico Xavier while he was alive. And for many years, this made me very, very sad. This let me down. I can say sad and jealous, because every time when some friends like Geraldo Lemos tells the story of his with Chico, I have crises of envy. Or when John Harley says this or that about a certain experience, an event, I even have a dysrhythmia, so my heart skip a bit. So yeah, I'm a bit sad and jealous of them because I didn't meet Chico while he was alive. But recently I had a wonderful moment in my life. I was preparing a study on my friend Paul of Tarsus, and at that point when I was preparing my studies, Paul was being discredited by the other apostles because he had not lived with Jesus, so he didn't meet Jesus. And Paul reflects and then considers, I knew Christ in all his glory. I knew him in spirit. And that was liberating for me, because I also met Chico Xavier in his glory, in his literary glory. I got to know Chico Xavier because of his works. I met him through the most beautiful way, the way that spirituality used him as a medium, but not an ordinary medium like those that pop in all the times on TV shows. Chico was the medium of hope, the medium of love, the medium of friendship, the medium of restoration. So it is with a great joy that I can say that today I come to talk about my dear friend of readings, friend of advice, friend that offers me a shoulder, friend that holds my tears, and very often a friend that cries with me. This is my friend Chico Xavier. But I hope one day, when no more living in the flesh, I could be able to embrace him and kiss his hands in a way to say thank you for everything you did for me, Chico. As Paul of Tarsus did when he found and saw Ananias, and kiss his hands. So, yeah, I would like to say this before we go to Celia's pathways. So, about Celia Lucius, the main character on the book 50 Years Later, Emmanuel tells us the following in the preface, letter to the readers, which opens 50 years later. Emmanuel says that a loving and wise heart, whose understands and applies all the lessons of divine masters in the pain-filled course of her life. So, Celia Lucius is described by Emmanuel as a loving and wise heart, and the one that understands and applies all the lessons of the Divine Master. So, here we can see that we are talking about somebody very, very special. But the title of our conversation today is Healing in the Pathways of Celia. So, I work with the text, with the words, etymology, with the intention of the words. And if there is healing, disease is assumed, right? So there is pain, there is discomfort. But based and supported on what do I develop my speech? In the book itself, Emmanuel already directs us to the reading, and he says, "Nevertheless, my brother or sister, open these pages and reflect on the edge of the tears that collect in the human heart, and think about the lot of bitter experience that the transitory days of life have brought you. It is possible that you too have loved and suffered much. At times you have felt the cold winds of adversity chill in your heart. At other times your well-intentioned and sensitive soul has been wounded by slander or deceit. In certain circumstances you, too, have looked up in the sky and silently asked where truth and justice might be found, invoking God's mercy in anguished prayer. Knowing, however, that all suffering has a glorious purpose for the redemption of souls, read this true story and ponder it. The examples of souls sanctified by suffering and humility will teach you to love the work and sorrows of each day. In observing its moral martyrdom and feeling closely its profound faith, you will experience a gentle comfort that will renew your hopes in Jesus. So, if we reflect on this word of Emmanuel, we understand that the life of Célia Lucius is a medicine. It's healing. Celia's examples are effective treatments for soul's pain. So, reading Emmanuel's books without any studying, line by line, word by word in the preface, is like traveling in a car without filling the tank. So, we have to start from the beginning, spending time on it to understand the whole of the book. But Emmanuel marvels so much at Célia Lucius' life, but so much immensely, that he doesn't tell the sequel of his own story, which begins in 2000 years ago book. It's told on 2000 years ago. As I said, it's the first book. And Emmanuel there is a Roman senator, Publius Lentulus. But he didn't talk about him in this book. He just skimmed it when talking about himself, because his focus, his attention is set on Célia Lucius. And like I said, I studied the words. I studied the first sentences of a book. How does it begin? How does it end? To what ideas this or that passage refers to? It is a kind of a reading beyond the text. And from this point, I would like to make a small observation, calling your attention to the grandeur implied in Emmanuel's work. Please, I call your attention for this, because it's very important to see that there are much more beyond that what we can read as a text on the Emmanuel's books. The first words, the opening words of the book 50 years later are these: breaking through the crowd. So the book starts with this, breaking through the crowd. And then in the Gospel of Mark 5, what lesson do we have? A woman breaking the crowd to touch Jesus' garment. Right? Yes, we have here the same plot, the same idea, breaking the crowd. Of course, here I'm isolating the text, right? Both texts. I'm just talking about breaking the crowd. But reading Chico, Xavier, and Emmanuel's works is to make our imagination overflow. They are full of messages, hints, and links to new readings and insights into the Gospel. And as readers, we have a freedom, and we own the text. We have the control of the text. I read and understand something. You read and understand something else, because you are living other experience and have different views. But the work written, printed on a paper is the same, immutable. So, the work belongs to everyone, but the lessons are individualized. And why do I say this? Because what you retain when you hear me talking about this book is just from my point of view, from my perspective. It's not a complete view. So, reading and meditating and studying the work, if you are doing this, reading, studying, you are tuning into the emotions of the authors, so Emmanuel and Chico Xavier's, and of course you are tuning with Célia Lucius as well, with the emotions. You become a part of the story, of the plot, because the reader is also a character. And more than that, the reader is the one who gives life to the work, to the book. Not taking part on this complex process, it will be only printed pages, sentences, paragraphs, and chapter, and that will be trapped on the shelves. It is the reader who frees the work. And when it happens, something incredible happens as well. Because the work also frees the reader. So, the reader frees the work, and the work frees the reader. There is a symbiosis, a bond, a connection in there. There is parts that connect and make one. So, we live our present moment nowadays when going through difficulties, facing difficulties, having hard times is a synonym of sadness and failure. In the spiritistic environment or movement, the catchphrases are, oh, this is due to past mistakes, so and so X is paying for what he did, because in other life and blah blah blah. But for the others, we say that is the divine justice. When it is with us, we ask for divine mercy. So, justice and mercy, we use it as we want, not the way we should. So, and then at this moment of difficulties, of hard times, we come across with a young girl, a very young girl, daughter of the noblest families of the Roman patriciate. She goes through enormous inconveniences, through unthinkable trials, but then she starts to have life, and life in abundance. Because as Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And Célia went to Jesus. Celia's burden was very heavy, but she asked Jesus for help, to help her to carry it. And Célia gave herself to Jesus without restrictions, without ifs or buts. And one of the most important elements in the lives of the characters in the works of Emmanuel and Chico Xavier is the providence of somebody or situation. They always find refuge. There are always hands and heart open wide to help. In the case of Célia Lucius, she has an old Christian woman who appears when the afternoon falls and she was lost and alone in Rome. And a woman named Ophelia come to help her. And in another situation was a man called Gregory or Gregorio. He's a carter, and he gives her a lift and take her as far as he could. When she was walking alone with a little baby in her lap, somebody come to help her and gave her a lift at Via Appia. Also, when she arrived in Minturnes, an old town in Italy, a man named Lesio Monacius welcomes her as a daughter. So it's through the pain and suffering that Célia teaches that God is always by our side, and He's always sending people or situation that will help us. And of course, reading it heals our soul. It gives us courage to give another step. It strengthens us. So that text, these examples don't let us collapse. Because when we are with Jesus, He heals us. Our Master is alive, active. And we must stop living with Jesus twice a year. At Christmas and Easter, we have to live with Jesus step by step, day by day, the same way Célia Lucius lived. And then there is a quote that I really like that say that the guidance of all men is outlined in the example of Jesus Christ. Who says this quote is Célia's grandfather in spirit, who appears to her when she is sleeping in a cave, alone, desolate. This cave is the famous Grotta di Tiberio, Tiberius cave in Sperlonga in Italy. And the description of this place by Chico, Xavier and Emmanuel is amazing. And it's such great honor, nearly 2,000 years after, go to this place and see that it is there exactly the way they said. And not just me, but lots of friends that has been there felt a different peace, an internal peace, because that there is something different in that environment, because there is seed of love in there. We can feel it. And but talking about the difficulties and hard times, we only think that we're fine when our pockets overflow with money, and most of the time allowing us to fall too easily. We must learn and heal from this fallacy. Money is good and necessary, yes, but without spiritual education, any amount of money loses its value. That's why Célia says to her brother-in-law, Caio, when she was inside that cave, he was passing by and Célia he threw for her some money, some coins, And she replies like this: Caio, go your way in peace. Keep your money, because a blessing from Jesus is worth more than 1,000,000 of sesterces. So, but we still get sick for crumbs, for a few cents, for anything that shines and looks like gold. We sell ourselves, we betray ourselves, because we still don't understand how much a blessing from Jesus is worth. We know what $1,000,000 is worth, but we don't know how much a blessing from Jesus is worth. On the Spiritist books, on the Spirit's book, question 918, after the question and the answer, Kardec had a comment, and he says, truly moral individuals are those who practice the law of justice, love and charity in its most complete purity. Those possessing the sentiment of charity and love for their neighbor do good for its own sake, without hope of reward, and they sacrifice their self-interest for justice's sake. They are good, human, and benevolent towards all, because they see their own brothers and sisters in all humans, regardless of race or belief. Now, when reading 50 years later, we can understand why and how Chico, Xavier and Kardec define a spirit like Célia Lucius. You know, there is a reason to tell her story, because by telling us this story, Emmanuel and Chico Xavier, they are giving us a real example of someone that decided to follow Jesus. And that is Célia Lucius. Célia Lucius represents what a true follower of Jesus must do. Above all, love. A follower of Jesus must, above all, to love. To follow the teachings of Jesus, Célia breaks a lot of paradigms. She breaks family traditions, Rome traditions. She crushes social taboos. So, try to imagine nearly 2,000 years ago, a girl that lives home in a condition of a single mother with a child in her arms, alone, without resources. Then she has to dress up as a man, lives off her own work for years and years. She is accused of mistakes she did make, and yet she remains faithful to Jesus. You know, I can only imagine Célia Lucius winning, conquering the world through this message from Chico Xavier. It's called Everything Passes. And these messages end, at the end it says that God is enough. God is sufficient. Only someone very close with God can trust Him at all times. So, she had nothing, but she had everything. You know, I admire a lot Célia. I love her a lot. I get emotional with Célia. I'm very grateful to her since we are talking about healing, let me tell you a personal story. It's a testimony actually. And when someone tells a testimony, it's not to talk about itself, but to glorify and to inspire people. So I hope this testimony of mine will glorify Célia through the love of Jesus and inspire people, maybe inspire you to read Célia's story, to heal yourself as well. 5 years ago, I returned from a trip on doing this route, Celia's Pathways in Italy, and I had followed the same trajectory as she does in the book. Everything beautiful, and many meditations, prayers, and I was ecstatic. Then when it finished, I got home on a Sunday night, and on a Monday morning I found out that my marriage for over 20 years was over, and it was not a peaceful end. It was a break, a rupture, a tragedy, and that quiet and beautiful life, the peace of home, disappeared in a blink of an eye, and I found myself alone with 2 daughters, without family, without being able to work, and then a great pain, a big pain, and a despair took me over. And that pain was too strong that I thought about killing myself. And in fact, actually, I want to live, but I couldn't hold that pain. That it was too much, and I realized that I wasn't ready to live that experience. But then, suddenly, an angel dressed in light, sent by Jesus, said to me in the silence of the night, "Well, you went to follow my way in Rome. Now I'm here to follow yours. You are not alone. Let's walk together. Let's heal together. Let's walk with Jesus." And Emmanuel says in his preface, "From the spiritual plane, the purified spirit of our heroine will pour the consoling balm of sublime hopes into your heart." And Emmanuel was right, because she put this balm of hope in my heart. And if I'm speaking to you here today, it is thanks to the help of Jesus, who came through Célia and many other friends, but she was there and she stand by my side. So it happened to me and can happen to you too. Now I hope that you can understand how beautiful, how great is to have friends like Jesus, like Emmanuel, like Chico, Xavier, like Célia, like you. Because we are here to help and support each other, no matter what happens. That's why we have this meeting. That's why we are here together, to heal together. So it's now time to say goodbye to you, and my heart is beating with plenty of joy, and I would like to end my speech with some phrases that are in the book that are healing for our hearts and souls. The first sentence that I would like to say to you is this one. Do not faint in the most bitter hours, for among the flowers of heaven there are those who accompany you in your suffering, strengthening the fibers of your exiled spirit. Another one is this: only joy is perennial, only joy reaches eternity. And the third one: rest in my mind and Jesus relieved me of all regrets. Another one: a little more calm and a little less pride. And this one: today I understand that everything in the world is love, and everything requires love. And the last one: may the Lord's blessings fill your path with light and peace in the future. Dear brother and sister, thank you very much, and peace and grace for all of you. It was a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to see you on the third meeting. God bless you all, and thank you very much.